Welcome into Unpaid Interns. Happy Friday afternoon. It is a beautiful Friday here. Feels like a perfect fall day. Getting ready for football tomorrow between Indiana and Michigan State here in Bloomington. Of course, they'll be playing in East Lansing, but we're going to give you a full preview today here on Unpaid Interns as Jim Coyle from Indiana Sports Beat joins me today. Jim, how you doing?
Doing fine, man. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. And it's obviously been quite a season for Indiana football for the first 3 weeks. You've covered Indiana sports for a while now. I mean, what's been reaction to just a crazy, really unbelievable season that sees Indiana with their highest ranking since 1969, 10th in the country?
Yeah, well, it's Tom Allen's doing the media tour. Indiana's getting love everywhere. They're in the top 10. They're ranked higher than the basketball program. I can go on and on and on because all those things have never happened before. So it's just it's a weird 2020, and it continues to stay weird, but it's weird in a good way for Indiana football. And it's something I don't see slowing down anytime soon either.
One thing you actually, I think you asked Tom Allen this in a press conference, and I found it interesting, is you mentioned kind of the change from Indiana from always being the hunter, or always being the hunted, I should say, to becoming the hunter. And kind of, I think it's going to be interesting, especially in tomorrow's game, to see how that plays out. Indiana going in as 7-point favorites against Michigan State, a team that they've lost 10 out of the last 11 games to. How do you see that playing out on Saturday and kind of the rest of the season, where, with the exception of Ohio State and Wisconsin, will be favored in every game the rest of the way?
Yeah, that's something. I had somebody on the show today. It was about gaming, but they kept saying, "Well, Indiana still got to prove. They still got to prove it to me." And I'm like thinking, man, they beat Penn State, they beat Michigan State, they went on the road, they beat Rutgers, which is not Rutgers of old, but it's still only 3 games, and so Indiana still has not, I guess, completely convinced people yet, because they're waiting for it to after 30 something or 50 years of seeing something one way. It's 3 games is not going to change that for people. But unless you are around the program like I am, you are, they're for real. I asked a question today about looking forward to Ohio State. Not looking forward so much but with Ohio State having the off week, would they potentially limit what they might show this week because of that? And in no uncertain terms, Tom Allen haven't even thought of that. He rattled off every statistic about Michigan State. From that, man, they are focused. So it's just, they are focused, and they're doing it the right way. A lot of times you see teams with this type of success, they don't handle it well, and that's what we've all been asking about and talking about. That's what that question was about, and Tom Allen knows that. He's guarding against that diligently, and I think they've done a good job. They went to Rutgers on the road, and that was that first kind of test, and that's where that question came from, because they've been chasing Penn State and Michigan State, but now you got Maryland. Maryland's going to be a team that you got to look out for. But so now Indiana's kind of weird. They're knocking these guys off, but then they got everybody else chasing them too. So it is a weird scenario, but I think they've handled it well. I've got to give them complete credit. A lot of times you see teams not able to do that because you're talking about 18, 19-year-old kids, and to be able to control that mentally, they've done a phenomenal job.
Obviously, one of the big aspects of the season for Indiana has been a healthy Michael Pennick, and he really looked like a game changer last Saturday against Michigan. Indiana's seen some very high-quality quarterbacks. Peyton Ramsey recently. Nate Sudfeld is the all-time passing leader in Indiana football history and is now with the NFL. What, in your mind, though, makes Michael Penix different, that he just, has led this team to heights that have not been seen in Bloomington in 50 years?
Well, first thing is just this freaky arm strength he has, man. I mean, golly, he came here. He was kind of a skinny kid, and he's not Ben Roethlisberger. He's not a big guy, but man, when he unleashes that ball, it looks like it's like a bullet coming out of a gun, and it's accurate. It doesn't fly away from him. So it's just that's kind of uncanny that you can't coach or teach that. But he's really mature. He's really confident. He doesn't seem to get shaken. And man, you talk about qualities you want in a quarterback. Those are it. And he just has great confidence. And it's not like Indiana has this great track record of winning to have built that confidence on. He brought that with him. So between his true natural capabilities and his mental maturity, he's a winner.
And one thing we've seen from Indiana, the first two games, we didn't see a lot of offensive consistency. You mentioned that Rutgers game. They're really slow in the first half. For almost the entire Penn State game, the offense looked a little off kilter. Then against Michigan, I mean, one of the best offensive performances we've seen in a long time, maybe the best offensive performance under Tom Allen, really played a complete game. I guess one of the things we're looking at on Saturday is, can they replicate that? What are kind of the keys that you think this Indiana team offensively needs to accomplish that they can consistently be a top offensive team in the Big Ten?
Well, they got to continue to get the passing game honed. I mean, he threw for 300 yards last week, but he threw the ball 50 times. Michigan threw for 300 yards and they only threw like 30 times. And it's not accuracy. Some receivers have dropped some balls, and they're just this and that things that happen. But they're winning. They're just got to continue to get more consistent, but that's what you do as the season progresses. As game to game goes by, you get better naturally, and they're doing what they need to do. A little more from the running game, I think. I'd like to see. Stevie Scott's not a breakaway runner, is not going to be a breakaway runner. That may be something Samson James becomes and has that kind of power, but as long as they keep that running game up, where last year they started the season with great difficulties and it showed. This year they haven't had that problem, but I still think they need to get a little bit more out of it, because you're going to have a day where, for whatever reason, passing game may not be working. You cannot have all your eggs in one basket. But more importantly, special teams. Man, special teams are still an issue to me, because you go back to the Gator Bowl, of course, we don't even have to talk about that, but you came into the start of the season, the Penn State at the end of the game where they go to squib kick the ball and he kicks it right to the guy in front of him. That could have been, if that's one more yard closer, they missed that field goal by a yard. So that's how close that mistake came to losing the game. We saw again an onside kick that they did not recover, while Filler got a personal foul on that. They got to clean that stuff up. Special teams are still an issue with them, and they've got a great kicker in Charles Campbell, and they've got a good punting. It's when I say they've got to clean it up, it's because it takes one mistake to wipe out all that good, and they seem to have a knack for allowing that one mistake in special teams to rear their head. So you got to just clean that stuff up. But your question was actually about offense, but man, they just get the running game going a little bit more, because they're just getting better as we go game to game. And as long as you see consistent improvement, that's all you can ask.
That was an interesting point about special teams. I think most people said the special teams have been good this year. Looking at Charles Campbell, who's been an excellent kicker. Hayden Whitehead's been good punting the ball, and kick coverage has felt pretty good. But I guess it's maybe some of those little things almost that you don't see, but that can potentially blow up a play and blow up a game that you're worried about.
Yeah, because you're right. They've got one of the best long snappers in the country. They've got one of the best kickers. They've got great punter. They've got good teams. But like I said, it just takes that one mistake. How many mistakes did it take in the Gator Bowl? One. It takes one mistake, and I keep seeing those kind of mistakes. It's like, it's a little scary, but I think they'll get it straightened out.
How about Nick Sheridan? It's his first year as the offensive coordinator for Indiana. What's your opinion so far of how he's ran the offense compared to what we saw Kalen DeBoer do last season for IU?
Well, first thing you got to say is they're 3-0. They beat Penn State. They beat Michigan. You have to give credit for that, to come in as a first-year guy and to face that kind of a schedule, to not have the non-conference schedule this year, to not have the practice that they had. He's been, had one hand tied behind his back. So you got to give him a passing grade. They've done well. They've improved. They've looked better. And the problems they had, a lot of people I haven't heard a lot of complaints of play calling. We saw drop passes and things like that. You can't, Nick Sheridan can't catch the ball for him. So he's done a good job. The offense has succeeded and been successful. And I don't recall them being in positions where but you can't judge one call. You're like, but if normally you'll get 2 or 3 calls in a row and you're like, what are they doing? I haven't seen that this year. Not one time. Now maybe part of that's because Indiana hasn't really been pressed a lot. They've been they've been in front of everything, but I got to give him a passing grade, and I'm surprised. I'll be honest with you. I was a little concerned, man. I was concerned because you've got Tom Allen, who's only a 4-year head coach. You've got Kane Womack, who's only a couple-year defensive coordinator, and then now a rookie offensive coordinator. But man, they're making it work. Tom Allen's making everything work. He's got the Midas touch.
No, everything is definitely going right for Indiana, and that includes on the defensive end. They've taken a huge step forward this season, and every guest I brought on, I've kind of asked the same question, what has made the difference from this year to last year? And, there's some players obviously that have stepped up, but no one seems sure exactly what to pinpoint that's made a difference besides that, they obviously just look much better and much more confident out on the field defensively.
Talent and growth. You've added some talent. You brought in a grad transfer, but you've also it's another year. It's another year under Kane Womack, and Kane Womack has another year as a defensive coordinator. So you got both of those learning, both getting better, but you didn't lose a lot, and that was the key. That's why next year I'm like, man, I can't wait to talk about next year because they lose nothing. But that's when you can. And Indiana has not had a history of having a lot of great talent on any particular unit, whether it's the O-line, the D-line at the same time. So when they lose that guy, if you look at the NFL, I'd say most of the people in the NFL from Indiana are offensive linemen, but they were not here at the same time. Ohio State's, Penn State's, they lose 2 or 3 guys at the same time off of the line, and they replace them. Indiana loses one, and it's been horrible for them. They're getting past that. They've elevated the talent. They've elevated the depth, and that's the difference. They've just gotten bigger, better, stronger.
They're 3-0. We don't want to critique them too much. One thing, though, that Kane Womack has said that he's concerned about is giving up explosive plays. They gave up 9 explosive plays against Michigan. I don't know exactly how Womack determined explosive plays, but according to him, that's what they gave up. And against Michigan State, you got Rocky Lombardi, who has a good arm, throwing to a lot of talented wide receivers. How much is that a concern for you for the Indiana defense, and how is that something they clean up tomorrow in East Lansing?
It's the concern because everything else has looked pretty good. Explosive plays, I don't know exactly what the yardage is, but I think it's any play that's over set yardage, over 15, whatever that parameter is. But, yeah, man, they gave up a lot of passing yards, not a lot of points. And so it's kind of the bend but not break thing. But that always worries me a little bit because it just seems like you live on the edge when you do that. So I think they need to – but – the DBs have been so much more active this year. How many times have we seen Tywan Mullen blitz? I mean, we didn't see him blitz that much last year. We've seen him blitz 3 or 4 times, a lot. The activity that Reese Taylor's having, man, they're much more active defensively in getting engaged in the running game, I think, than what we've seen before. So you're gonna miss a little bit, but they've still got to tighten it up. But not concerned terribly, just because I know the talent that they have there. But you don't want to see them give up that kind of yardage.
Oh, for a team that has always lost in those close games and struggled to get over that hump, and Penn State was finally that. How much did you feel that was a factor in Michigan, a team that you had, a lot of bad history against? And you even look at Michigan State. I mean, the history against the Spartans is kind of remarkable. Michigan State hasn't lost in East Lansing since 2001. Obviously, the game tomorrow is in East Lansing. How much is history still a factor in kind of that mental side of things for Indiana?
It's 0. I think it is now absolutely 0. And I say that because Saturday, when I was sitting in the press box watching the game, I can see, and I've said the same story probably 3 times, but I could see exactly where I was sitting as a student in 1987 when Indiana beat Michigan the last time. But that feeling was one of hope. Everyone was hoping Indiana could beat Michigan, hoping. But Saturday, from the opening bell, I didn't expect anything less. I would have been shocked had Indiana not won that game. It was such a weird and different feeling. And these kids that are on this team, they don't care. They don't care what happened 10 years ago, much less 33 years ago. They don't know. They don't care. Half of them are not from here. So it only plays a part of history for the fans. The players, they don't care. They're locked in. And part of that is because Tom Allen has them locked in is why they're able to not care, but they really don't. I think that history is now out the window, and that's a good thing for Indiana because I think it used to play too much of a part. I think it did, but I think that Tom Allen has come in, brought this culture in, and has just been able to take an eraser and just wipe all that stuff out. And just everybody's got a clean mind. All those players have a clean mind. Their memory started when they arrived on this campus, and that's how they're playing. That's what I saw Saturday. And like I said, it was, man, I expected nothing but a win the whole time because I'm watching this team play the way they were playing. They were playing like they had beaten Michigan the last 5 times they played. So, yeah, it's a good thing for Indiana, and that's something that I don't think a lot of people realize that Allen has done with this culture is he's wiped that stuff out. They don't care. Those players don't care about that history, that losing history.
Now, you mentioned the fans, and obviously, there are basically no fans that are allowed in the stadium. And the Indy Star put out an article today kind of talking about the irony in that there aren't fans and having to watch from home after, Indiana fans have suffered for such a long time and through heartbreak. Is there any truth in the reasoning that was put out in social media that Indiana has been more successful, especially at these 2 big home games, because there aren't fans there with maybe the expectation that they're going to lose or nervousness, almost like they're waiting for them to collapse? Or is that people making stuff up?
In my opinion, I mean, because that's just an opinion by anybody, but absolutely not. I mean, again, I just go back to exactly what I just said. These players don't care about the fans, and I don't mean that in the way it sounds. They don't care about any perceptions, any expectations. They have their own expectations. They have their own goals. They're living, they're playing, they're LEO, and they're loving each other. They're living that. They really are living that, and it is showing, and it works. And so, because of that, no. I truly believe they're not influenced by they have no outside influence. They are really, from my vantage point, what I've seen and talking to them, they got blinders on, man. They don't care. They're full steam ahead, and that's why a lot of people like this game this week. And Indiana's like a 7.5 point favorite. It kind of goes back and forth. And everybody's, Indiana's on upset alert. It's a trap game. And this is that situation. This is that type of situation that would be a trap game for any other team, especially one that has not enjoyed success like Indiana hasn't. But again, in talking to Tom Allen in the Zooms and whatnot, they seem laser focused. I'm not worried about them covering the spread or whatever else. They seem like they're locked in.
As much as Indiana has been certainly filtering out the noise from the outside, there has been a lot of noise that is, clearly spread across the country about Indiana football. And we might have saw some of that reflected yesterday when DJ Matthews, who was a top wide receiver at Florida State, announced he's transferring to Indiana. He'll be eligible for 1 season next year to play. He was a top recruit out of high school, 4-star, had offers from Clemson, Alabama. I mean, we would never see this from Indiana, a top transfer going to the Hoosiers. I mean, is this just a factor basically of the last 3 weeks of a top player suddenly deciding to join Tom Allen?
I think it's a factor of the last 3 weeks on top of the last 3 years. Tom Allen has been selling this this bill of goods for 3 years since he's been head coach, and the players started buying in. Players like Tywan Mullen, who's going to be an NFL player one day. Players like Michael Pennick, who's going to play in the NFL one day from Florida. And it still surprised me when he could get someone over one of those schools, but to get someone who was at one of those schools and now saying, and who turned down, I think, Clemson, Alabama, I can't remember who else he turned down before he went to Florida State. So he's turned all those down. He's at Florida State, and he's leaving to go. He's going to leave the Sunshine State to go to Bloomington, Indiana. Yeah, that says a lot about what Tom Allen has done over the 3 weeks. Yeah, that's kind of just put the stamp on what he's been selling for those that maybe were listening to him. And I'm sure this kid was one of those. Maybe they recruited him. I don't remember, but this is just putting the stamp on his last 3 years. These last 3 weeks have assuredly.
Will no doubt be a major pickup for Indiana next year, and likely we'll see him catching more balls potentially from Michael Penix. And I guess the second part of that question is, going forward, I mean, you mentioned Indiana is all over the media. I mean, this week, and they've almost been the top story in college football in terms of one specific team. They're talking to them about College Game Day. Yesterday, I was reading the weekly ESPN preview article of all the games. They have a one-on-one interview with Tom Allen. I mean, it's been very strange just being around Indiana football the last couple of years and then suddenly seeing everyone cover them. But could this potentially have benefits for Indiana? You look at the recruiting trail.
potentially nothing yesterday. I mean, you just followed up to what we just talked about. Now, that's a part of that too. When these kids that's who they see all the time. They see Penn State and Michigans and Ohio States and Alabamas and Auburns and Clemson. That's who now they're seeing Tom Allen in Indiana. Instead of Dabo Sweeney, it's Tom Allen. I mean, that has never happened. It's never happened in Indiana football. The only Indiana football love they got was Lee Corso going on College Game Day. But yeah, it's a gigantic boost in the arm. It's a commercial for Indiana football. Every time he goes on Sports Center or he goes on any of these shows, it's a commercial for Indiana football. And when you see all these other people love it, when you see Pat McAfee putting his stamp on it, man, these kids see that stuff. And then they also see all these other kids going here. They see people transferring here. It's going to, yeah, it's the change has started. I mean, it is in the motion right now.
It's interesting how things snowball so quickly. From it kind of been it feels like it's been a slow build for 3 years. He's slowly building that Michigan State game.
Slow build for 50 years, my friend.
Well, right, and you know, I feel like this Michigan State game is interesting just because looking back on it, I don't know. You've been around the team a lot longer than me, but that Michigan State game, even though they lost and they should have won that game, that felt different. That was maybe the moment they knew they had Michael Penix, and they knew, you know, in the next year that the slow build was suddenly going to speed up and something special was going to happen. Am I right in saying that?
I've said a lot. That was Michael Penix's coming out party. He played in other games, but that was his coming out party. He went up there. They should have won that game. He almost set a Big Ten record with 20 consecutive passes. They looked good. He looked solid. They made mistakes and didn't finish. But yeah, that was his coming out party, and that's what, at least for me, I'm like, okay, this is going to be fun. You can see, and I think it probably told him, and it told the team, it told them, well, they know they should have won that game, and that hurts, but you want that to hurt because that's what boosted them to go 8-5 last year.
We've talked all about a lot of the top players already. Who's a player maybe that you think's been a big impact on this team and their success, but that, you know, hasn't been talked about a lot by media?
Man, that's hard to say. The young guys are coming in and making an impact, but it's been so spread out that there's so many people that are part of this, but nobody more than Michael Penix. I mean, I know that's the obvious, but that's not what you ask. But it's so spread out, and I think, and that's a good thing. It's actually a good thing that no one is really jumping out because everyone has got a nice row. Whop Phillier actually stood out more last year, I think, than he has this year. And that's a good thing because it's being spread around. But if it's not Whop, it's Ty. If it's not Ty, it's Marshall. If it's not Marshall, it's who knows? It's everywhere. And that is the mark of a great football team because you can't wait. How do you stop that? You take one piece out, well, you got 7 more pieces that are equally coming at you. And that's another thing that Indiana's never had. In the moments of their success, they think back to, they had Anthony Thompson. Well, Anthony Thompson was far superior than any talent that's on that field right now. I think maybe it's the Michael Penix, but not just having a great player like Michael Penix and a whole bunch of really good ones. Indiana's that's not something they normally have.
Well, we've talked a lot about, you know, how exciting this team is, and you start looking forward, obviously, Michigan State on Saturday to try to erase some demons, Ohio State in 2 weeks, and a very uncertain college football landscape, especially what we've seen just in this past week with COVID cancellations. What do you think is the ceiling potentially for this team? You know, can they compete with Ohio State, potentially go to a New Year's Six bowl game? It seems crazy that we'd even talk about that, but what do you think is the ceiling?
Well, that's a great question, and that's what we're going to find out next week. I don't know if we find out what their ceiling is next week, but we'll find out if they can compete with Ohio State. On paper, they're not supposed to be. Ohio State's got, 24 5-stars probably, and, you know, you go on down the line. But this is sports, and it's college sports, so any given Sunday. But I know we play on Saturdays, but yeah, I've been as positive about the football teams as I can. I haven't been able to put them in that category yet, though, that I'm not going to say they can't compete with Ohio State. Surely they can compete with them. Beating them. Can they beat Ohio State? That's the question. Can they beat them? Man, from what I've seen, if straight up, Ohio State's a better team. It's not knocking Indiana. They just have more, better, deeper players. But that doesn't mean they can't beat them. I mean, teams have weird days, turnovers, change the game. So, but other than Ohio State, no, there's not a team that I don't expect Indiana to be exactly even, or the favorite with. There is no one I see on the schedule that I put above Indiana. That includes at Wisconsin. I see Indiana being equal to anybody else on the schedule in Ohio State. And I think, can they beat Ohio State? Sure. I would never say that they can't do something. Are they likely to do it? No, probably not. But that's okay. That's not that would be expecting perfection, and I think that's a little much right now.
I guess the question is now, with our raised expectations for this team, what is viewed as a successful season at the end of the year? Is it a bowl victory? Is it 8-9 wins? When we look back in January, now that we see this team as a top 15 team in the country, what can we say? Tom Allen accomplished, what he set out to do. And this was obviously it's been a fantastic season, but kind of finished the season strong, I guess.
And I think you can answer that question so many different ways. In Indiana standards, if they did the exact same thing they did last year, that's success for Indiana. For Tom Allen, probably, or you have to do more. You have to improve. And for me, I think I want to see improvement. I said that at the very beginning of the season. I said, I have to see improvement. If not, what are you doing? Are you spinning your wheels? Well, I've already seen improvement. This team is way better, but they're doing the things that they need to do. They're winning the games that they are not expected to win, or at least weren't expected by most people to win. So, but I think that's going to continue. They don't lose anybody. These coaches are locked in. These players are locked in. And that's the thing, man, you talk about having a team that's on the same page in so many different ways. The difference that makes in a football team, I can't even begin to talk about that because there's so many of them, the numbers, but to have them all together. And I think I sent a tweet out a year ago about Tywall Mullen. And it was just, you could start to see these guys locked in. It started to become, it was palpable to me. I could see it, feel it, hear it, and tell. And that was a year ago when I noticed it. And this is just now, it's just coming to full fruition. And it's exciting to see, but what a credit to Tom Allen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just thinking about Mullen and thinking about his coming out party as well. Was also that Michigan State game. He had a couple pass breakups. So it'll be interesting to see the team go back to East Lansing as kind of the place where maybe all of this started. Anyways, want to get a prediction for you. And what do you think is a key kind of, so I think we all, Indiana's the favorite, but what's a key that the Hoosiers can make sure they're in control and Hoosier fans aren't nervous by the fourth quarter?
Don't turn the ball over. Just, man, never. And that's just, you cannot turn the ball over ever. But I've talked so much about Indiana being locked in, Coach Allen being locked in, and I believe that. But I also do believe that there will be a little bit when they go up there. There's no way that Michael Pennick and Bob Fillier and those guys are not going to remember, because it was last year. Normally it's 2 years before you go back. Because of the weird season this year, they go back again. So there's no doubt that's going to be on their mind. But I think that they'll stay locked in. The spread 7.5, I don't think it's that close. I thought Indiana would win convincingly last week, and they did. And I think that they do the same this week. I'm thinking the score is going to be 34-17. I think Indiana continues to do what they've done and stays focused. And the defense has really been impressive. And I think that they fixed some of those secondary issues that we saw last week.
Before I let you go, Jim, I do want to ask you one question about Indiana basketball. It's weird the season's coming up so quickly. We were 2 weeks yesterday away. Wow. We're 12 days away from the start of the season. no, we still don't know a full schedule, but we know it's going to be a really challenging schedule for our Miller's Hoosiers, almost exclusively Power 6 games. What are your expectations this year for Indiana men's basketball?
Man, this Big Ten, holy cow. You talk about tough. Illinois, Iowa, they're looked at both at potentially national championship contenders. And then the Big Ten goes 7, 8 deep. It is an absolute meat grinder. Rutgers is in the top 15. I mean, golly, it's going to be a brutal season. I think we'll get a better indication after these non-conference games, because while there's not a lot, they're challenging the Maui / Asheville Invitational. You got Florida State on there, Butler. So we'll see how they're gelling, how these freshmen are going to, can they play a part? Can Jordan Geronimo, how quickly can he adjust to the college game? Because I don't know much about him. Didn't see him play a lot, but he's got this weird, freaky athletic ability and this 7'3" wingspan. They've got a lot of good players, a lot of talent, and they've got experience. Trace Jackson Davis, although he's young, he's experienced now, but you've got the older guys and Rob Finney and Al Durham and Joey Brunk, and we'll see how that experience welds with this young talent, Christian Lander, the sensational point guard. How much of an impact can he make? It's going to be interesting. As far as predictions are almost worthless right now, because it's gonna. I don't know what they're gonna be like in this season, because it's going to be a really challenging one against teams that are really experienced. Iowa, Illinois, man, those guys got talent and experience.
And November 25th, the start of the basketball season for both men's and women's. And I guess I feel like if I'm going to ask about IU men's basketball, I need to ask one question about the women's team too. Just a couple days ago, announced for the first time in school history, predicted to finish first in the Big Ten. How excited are you about Terry Moran's squad this season for Indiana women's basketball?
You got to be happy for them. She's done a great job, and that thing, you've seen this coming. It's not like this thing's out of the blue. It's just been building ever since Tyra's senior year. They really they got to the NIT championship, but it really just, from that moment, it really just kept going. And but you've seen it, and I like watching them play. They're fun to watch. They play really good basketball. They're fundamentally sound. They shoot well. They take care of the ball. And they were fun to watch last year. They were good last year. They're just better this year because they have everybody back minus I'm dropping her
Brenna
name.
Wise.
Yeah, minus Brenna. But so man, when you can get that much talent back, whoo. So I think they definitely should win the league. And that's saying a lot too. I mean, there's some good teams in the Big Ten. I'm interested to see what can they do on the national level. We saw them beat, was it South Carolina they beat last year? It's currently number 1. So yeah, that's what's fun to see, and that'll be fun to see what they can continue to do there.
Well, it's a really exciting time in IU athletics, starting with the football team, but with basketball season coming up, it's going to be a crazy time for all of us covering IU sports. Jim, we really appreciate you coming on today and providing your expertise.
I appreciate you, man. You do a great job. Keep it up, and good luck with everything. It's been fun.
Thanks so much, Jim. Appreciate that.
Appreciate you.
That will do it for this week's episode of Unpaid Interns. Appreciate Jim Coyle coming on today and all of our guests this week. We will be back on Monday. We have a really special guest, Lisa Byington from the Big Ten Network, one of the great broadcasters for BTN, is going to be joining us to talk Indiana football and college sports. That's going to be one of our most exciting episodes. Join us then 10 a.m. on Monday morning. Until then, have a great weekend. Enjoy the Old Brass Spittoon game, and we'll talk to you again on Monday.